Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back in another video today, and today I'm going to be doing my Houston Texans game-by-game predictions. This is going to be a fun season for the Houston Texans. I've been meaning to do this video for a while, but the schedule got out a week ago, and I've been busy, talking about Rockets offseason, NBA offseason, NBA playoffs, and even Astros baseball. So finally get to talk about it on a Friday. It's Thursday. On a Thursday. Feels like a Friday, though. But I'm going to go over my predictions for this Houston Texans season in 2024. It's going to be a fun skit. It's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a fun season. I think it will be a very interesting season for the Texans. I'm gonna get into my predictions for the Houston Texans team, game by game predictions. This is a very easy schedule to start off, and I'm just trying to figure out where to give the Texans a loss. And honestly, I'm going to give the Texans a loss week one. It's not something I want to do, but just thinking about how the Texans struggled defensively against Anthony Richardson last year, and had a really troubled time playing this Colts team. Was a very close game in Week 18 against Gardner Minshew. I feel like the Texans in Indianapolis might have some trouble. Now, Anthony Richardson's first game back might be a little rough, so potentially that really could be a Texans win. But I see a huge stretch of potential wins after week one. Very well could see the Houston Texans starting off week one with a loss. I'm going to go ahead and say they get a week one loss. Then the next week, week two, you have the Chicago Bears, Sunday Night Football, 7:20. This is going to be a game where Caleb Williams and his wide receiver trio comes into town. It's going to be a hard matchup for the defense. I see this being a close game for the Texans, and I see this being a game where the Texans have to fight for a win. But I think their defense plays a big role in this potential win. Like C.J. Stroud and their it's going to be the best wide receiver trios in the league going up against each other, with the Texans having Tank, Stephon, and Nico, and the Bears having Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore, both with the Texans being at home and the Texans having a more experienced team and a more experienced quarterback. I believe the Texans get their first win of the season, week two, against the Chicago Bears. So then another matchup against the NFC West. This is going to be an interesting match. Or sorry, I meant NFC North. This is going to be an interesting matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. Who will be playing quarterback at this time? Could it be J.J. McCarthy? Could it be Sam Darnold? I think this could be another close game because it's a road game and you're playing another very good wide receiver trio, or not trio. KJ Osborne left for New England, but a good wide receiver duo in Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. But Texans have better quarterback play in this one, and I believe a better defense. So I'm going to go with the Texans getting another win and going to 2-1. Then the next game back at home, September 29th for week 4, and I'm going to go ahead and say the Houston Texans get their third straight win and beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. So that takes it's a 3-1 for the Houston Texans. Then you have a week 5 matchup against the Buffalo Bills. If this was a road game for the Houston Texans, I would give the Texans a loss here because Buffalo's a hard place to play. But this is Stephon Diggs rematch game or revenge game, and not only that, but this is a home game for the Texans. And I'm not gonna say we win every home game this year, which I think the Texans actually do pretty good at home this year. But at the same time, I don't see the Texans losing this game just because of the fact that, the Bills are a lot worse than they've been in the past, and I think they could put up a fight. But I see the Texans winning, and that takes us to 4-1. Then the New England Patriots. This would be a very interesting game. Another potential matchup against a rookie quarterback. This will be. I think Drake May will definitely be a starter by then. I see the Texans getting another win and improving to 5-1. But then you have the Green Bay Packers on the road. It's going to be a hard place to play. Another hard road game. I think there are a lot of hard road games that the Texans will have to play. On a winning streak, at this point you'd be 5 in. What's that? That would be 5-1 going into Green Bay. Do you get yourselves a loss? I think this is a very high scoring game. I see both teams having a really good game. I'm going to go ahead and say the Texans end up winning this one to improve to 6-2. Then the next week at home, October 27th, against the Indianapolis Colts. I do not see the Houston Texans getting swept against the Colts. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Houston Texans end up winning this matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, which takes them to 7-1. But here comes a loss for the Texans, as I have the Houston Texans losing to the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. Short week, probably had to fight against Indianapolis. I could see this being a closer game than last year's game against the New York Jets, but that's a tough defense. It's a better offense than it was last year. I see this being a tough game for the Houston Texans, where they take a tough loss, and that takes them to 7-2. Then the Detroit Lions at home. I'm gonna have to give the Texans their first home loss here. I think this is a definitely a a tough matchup for the Texans at home, but I'm gonna go with the Lions beating the Texans, and that's back-to-back losses, and at that point they're at 7-3. But then Dallas Cowboys, you have your third straight. I mean, when was the last time? Has the Texans ever had three straight national? There's no way the Texans have had three straight national televised games. I'm gonna go ahead and say the Houston Texans beat the Dallas Cowboys, and they improve to 9 and or that would be 8-3. But then back at home, I have the Houston Texans beating the Indianapolis Colts, the Tennessee Titans, to bring them to 9-3. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to go ahead and say the Houston Texans beat the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road and sweep the Jaguars, which takes them to 10-3. But after the bye week, with the Texans rolling, this would be 3 straight wins. I think this would be a game, just depending on how the Dolphins are doing. Maybe the Texans are the favorite at home, but I see this being a game. And last time the Dolphins faced the Texans, they had the last 2 times they faced, going back to the preseason and in the 2022 season, the Dolphins have had have done a really good job offensively against this Texans team. I see this being a struggle for the Texans defense. I'm going to go ahead and say the Houston Texans lose this one and go to 10-4. But I'm going to give them back-to-back losses, and that's going to be 10-5 against the Kansas City Chiefs. If this was the home game, I could see the Texans winning. I'm not going to say the Texans could not win in Arrowhead, but I just see the Texans losing the game in Kansas City, which brings them to 10-5. And then this could be considered an upset, but at home against a very tough defense, I'm going to say the Houston Texans beat the Baltimore Ravens and go to 11-5. So then the last week of the season, Tennessee Titans on the road. I'm a little confused about this one because I want to give the Texans a win, but I feel like in this, it just depends on how Jacksonville, and I don't want to be rude to Tennessee, but I think it just depends on how good Jacksonville and Indianapolis are at this point of the season, because let's just say the Texans have already locked down the division. And, Jacksonville and Indianapolis doesn't have a chance. Maybe the Texans rest their starters. If the Texans rest their starters, they put out either Case Keenum or Davis Mills and the second unit. On the road, I would see the Tennessee Titans beating us. But just assuming our starters are going to be out there, I'm going to go with these Texans beating the Titans. But I think realistically, at an 11-5 record, I think the Colts and the Jaguars will be good teams. I think the Texans... I feel like they'll have a shot to make the playoffs, but I don't see them being, close to the division. I don't see them being, that good where, they have a chance to fight for the division if the Texans are 11-6 or 11-6 or 12-5. So I believe that the Texans, I see for the Colts and the Jags, them each getting... I would say for the Colts, I could see them getting 9 or 10 wins, and for the Jags, I could see them getting 9 to 11 wins. Which, I mean, for the Texans, that would have them locked up. That would lock up the division before Week 18. Because yes, if the Jags and the Texans have the same amount of wins, that they would be tied, but the Texans would hold the tiebreaker, beating them both matchups. And if the Colts only win 9 or 10 games, then you don't have to worry about the Colts. So I could see the Texans, if locked up the division, rest their starters on the road against Tennessee. And if that happens, I would think the Texans will lose that game. So it just depends about what's going on in the AFC South in Week 18. But I think the Texans either go 11-6 or 12-5. But let me know your thoughts on this Texans schedule in the comment section and your predictions. Peace out. Go Texans.